Autumn 1987. On a wind-scoured hillside above the Hakarimata Range on New Zealand's North Island, a survey team stripped down to yellow clay wrote a single line in their notebook: "Bare for a generation." And the only thing already growing there was the one plant every farmer slashes and burns on sight: gorse. Stand on that slope, and there is almost nothing to look at. The topsoil is long gone, burned off and grazed away, and what's left is bald clay, the color of old butter, cracked and slick where the rain has been cutting little rivulets down toward the rivers. No birdsong, no seedling, no shade, just that one handwritten verdict in the field notebook: bare for a generation, and a low, spiny tangle of gorse, Ulex europaeus, the thorny European weed that farmers curse and clear on sight. Everyone who saw it agreed on what came next. The farmers, the foresters, the survey team, scribbling in the wind, all of them looked at that thicket and read the same fate. Gorse chokes land. It sprawls. It hoards the light. It locks a hillside into a dense, thorny mat that nothing native can push through. They expected the weed to hold that slope dead, silent, finished, written off. That's not what happened. 20 years later, scientists climbed back up that same slope, pushed in through the spines, and found something growing in the dark beneath them. Something alive. Something no one had planted, no one had planned for, and something that, to this day, they can't fully agree on why it worked so well. Hold that picture in your head, a dead slope. Before we climb back up that slope to see what the birds did next, one quick thing. If you're finding yourself rethinking a plant you were taught to hate, that's exactly what this channel is for. Overlooked stories, where the thing everyone wrote off turns out to be the quiet hero. If that's your kind of story, hit like and subscribe and turn on the bell so the next one finds you. Now, back to that hillside and the seeds the birds carried in for free. A hated weed, because what's under those thorns changes everything. I'm Peter, and this is the full story of how the plant nobody wanted quietly rebuilt a forest. We'll walk the whole reversal together. How the land got broken in the first place. The one strange mechanism most people have never heard. The reason a weed can act as a nursery for the very trees meant to replace it. And the small detail, a single word, that outlasted everything else on that hillside. The plant you're picturing as the villain of this story is about to become the hero. And to understand how that's even possible, you have to throw out the word you've been taught to use, pest. Because gorse isn't just a pest sitting on a hillside, taking up space, waiting to be cleared. Look closer at what it actually does. Its roots pull fertilizer out of thin air and push it down into dead ground. Its canopy throws a deep, cool shade across the bare clay. It spines the thing everyone hates, the thing that tears your hands and snags the sheep, turn out to be a wall, a shelter, a roof. Gorse, it turns out, is an engineer. That's the frame that matters here. And it's the frame nobody used in 1987. On that slope, the weed wasn't choking the land. It was building on it. Slowly, invisibly, under a canopy so dense the sun barely reached the soil, it was holding a door open and something was walking through. But we're getting ahead of the story, because a nursery only matters when there's a wound to heal. And this hillside carried a deep one. Before the weed could rescue anything, the land itself had to be broken properly, thoroughly, by us. And it was. By the 1970s, roughly 90% of this region's original lowland native forest was already gone, cleared, burned, abandoned. And every careful human attempt to put it back, the seedlings, the plans, and the good intentions, died on that open ground by the thousands. So, before we get to the miracle beneath the thorns, we have to sit with the failure that came first. We have to see how completely the land defeated us. Here's how it broke. By the 1970s, roughly 90% of the region's original lowland native forest was gone. First, it was cleared for pasture, hacked and burned back to make room for sheep. Then, the thin soil failed, the grass thinned out, and the farmers simply walked off, leaving the slope open to the sky. And the sky was not kind. Rain hammered the exposed clay, storm after storm, and carried the last of the good soil down into the rivers in long brown ribbons. What had taken a forest 1,000 years to build, washed out to sea in a decade. So the foresters tried to put it back the obvious way. They carried native seedlings up that slope by hand and planted them straight into the open ground, and the land killed them by the thousands. Full sun scorched the little leaves brown. Frost cracked them open on clear nights. The wind dried them to brittle sticks before their roots could ever take hold. They tried again. Different seasons, tougher species, more shelter, same result. Bare clay, dead seedlings, a survey team writing the same grim verdict in the notebook year after year. The land defeated every human plan thrown at it. And all the while, one thing kept growing on that hillside without any help at all. The gorse. The thorny European weed everyone slashes and burns on sight. It didn't need the soil to be good. It didn't need shelter. It just spread, spiny and stubborn, across the ground we'd given up on. Here's the part that genuinely unsettled the researchers, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. Start underground. Gorse does something most plants can't. On its roots sit tiny swellings, little nodules, and inside them live bacteria that pull nitrogen straight out of the air. Nitrogen, in plain terms, is fertilizer. It's the thing that thin, washed-out clay has almost none of, the reason nothing would grow there. And the gorse just makes its own, out of thin air, and feeds it into the dead soil year after year. It's fertilizing the very ground everyone had written off. That alone would be remarkable. But it isn't even the real trick. The real trick is shade. That dense, spiny tangle grows into a low, thick canopy, and underneath it, the world changes. The scorching sun is broken up into soft green gloom. The killing frost can't reach the ground. The wind that dried out every seedling on the open slope simply stops at the wall of thorns. And in that sheltered dark, something starts to grow. Native seedlings. The real forest. Tawa, kohe, maho, the very trees the foresters couldn't keep alive in the open, germinating quietly in the gloom beneath the weed. Protected from sun, frost, and wind by the exact same thorns that humans had been hacking down for a century. Botanists have a name for it. The nurse effect. One plant sheltering the seedlings of another until they're strong enough to stand alone. Picture those thorns not as a weapon, but as a roof. That's the whole secret. The pest, it turns out, was raising the forest that would one day replace it. And here is the most elegant part of the whole thing. As those native seedlings push up through the tangle, they grow taller, they thicken, and slowly they lift their own canopy over the gorse and steal its light. Gorse needs full, blazing sun to live. So the more successful the forest it shelters becomes, the deeper into shadow the gorse falls and it dies. The weed kills itself by succeeding. It holds the door open, ushers the forest through, and then quietly bows out. Which raises the obvious question. If the plant does all of this on its own, what exactly does it need from us? Almost nothing. That was the strangest lesson of all. After decades of planting and burning and failing, the managers finally tried the one thing no one had dared to. On several plots, they made a decision that sounds like giving up. They stopped clearing the gorse and simply walked away. That was the entire lever. And then, everyone waited to see what a dead slope would do, with no help at all. And the answer arrived in a single hard number from a 2009 study. Here is that number. On the plots where managers stopped clearing the gorse and walked away, the ground did not stay dead. Botanists went back and counted, and the tidy cleared slopes next door, the ones humans had kept neat and grassy, were still just grass. But under the thorns, something had been quietly happening. The 2009 study by Landcare Research, published in the New Zealand Journal of Ecology, put it in cold, hard figures. The abandoned gorse stands held, on average, 32 native woody species per hectare within 30 years. 32. Tawa, kohe, maho, all of it regenerating on its own. No planting, no seedling trays, no cost, nobody standing there with a spade. A whole native forest was rebuilding itself faster under the weed than under any human hand that had ever touched that hillside. And then the ecosystem finished the job for free. As the young trees pushed up through the spines and started to fruit, the birds came back. Tui, kereru, the fat wood pigeons, moving from branch to branch, eating and dropping seed exactly where it needed to fall. Nobody paid them. Nobody planned their flight paths. They simply arrived and got to work, carrying the next generation of forest into the shelter the gorse had built. The land was healing itself, and all we'd done was stop interrupting it. Now, I want to be honest about what this story does not solve, because it would be easy to end here, in the warm glow of a forest reborn, and leave out the rest. And I'd be lying to you if I pretended this was simple, so let me be straight about the parts that aren't. Gorse is still viciously flammable. On a dry summer slope, it can go up like a struck match, and that's a real danger to homes and stock. It is still a genuine curse on active farmland. Still the thing a farmer is right to slash and burn when it's choking good pasture. And on drier sites, where the natives never get established, the gorse can lock itself in place for decades and simply never hand the land over. It just sits there, thorny and stubborn, and the forest never comes. So this is not a license to love it everywhere. The nurse effect is real, but it is not a miracle you can order up on any hillside you please. That, honestly, is part of why the scientists still don't fully agree on why it worked so beautifully on that one slope above the Hakariimata Range. But there is one thing that stayed with me, one small detail that outlasted everything else. If you read the old settler diaries from those hills, you find gorse cursed with a name. They called it the vermin of the hills. Vermin, the thing you exterminate, the thing that has no right to be there, the pest you clear off the land with fire and blade. That was the verdict, written down in ink over 100 years ago. Go up that same Hakariimata slope today and ask the locals what they call the tangle that made the trees. They have a different word now. They call it the nursery. The name outlasted the insult. Think about that. The very same plant, same spines, same yellow flowers, same roots in the same clay. But the story we tell about it turned completely around because the land itself told us the truth. The thing we clear and burn was quietly holding the door open for everything we said we wanted. The birds, the tall trees, the shade, the forest, all of it came in under the protection of the plant we hated most. That, to me, is the heart of it. Go back to that field notebook, autumn 1987. One line, one verdict, bare for a generation. A stripped, wind-scoured slope of yellow clay that everyone agreed was finished. That line was wrong. It was already wrong the moment it was written, because the thing they wrote off as a weed was, right then, beginning to build the forest that stands there today. If you know a comeback like this, a place that came back when we finally stepped aside, tell me in the comments. I read them, and they're half the reason I keep looking for these. Subscribe and turn on the bell, because there are more of these comeback stories than you'd believe. Thanks for watching.